Okay, good to have you with us, and thankful to have you here. We will, if we don't get to, we're going to stop at 11 because, I don't want to go too much over 11 because it just gets too tiring and too much for me and you. So we're going to stop at 11. We're picking up around 3, 8:3 is where we're picking up today. We're going to talk a little bit about the altar of the incense. We'll go through that here. I'll open with a word of prayer, and then we'll review real quick where we were last week, and then we will move through. Let's pray. Lord, we're so grateful to be here this day, to continue to learn about Revelation. We're grateful, Lord, that you brought us here safely, and we ask, Lord, that you be with the members of our class who can't be here today. But you keep them in your loving care as well, and those who watch our class, Lord, online. We're so grateful for the opportunity to learn these things and to share this time together. Keep us in your peace always, and thank you for all good gifts. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Okay, so let's take a look. I'm just going to run back for a second and remind you of where we've been. And let's step back here for just a second. So we're talking about the trumpet, and I think we left off last week, as you'll recall, talking about the symbolism of the trumpet in Revelation. And I ran you through a number of things. And I'll just remind you again how the trumpet was used, because we're getting now into the trumpets, the sounding of the trumpets and what's going to happen after the sounding of the 7 trumpets. So the use of the trumpet, as you'll recall, was derived from Judaism. In Revelation, the trumpet is never used ever to signal the return of Christ. But as we're going to see in the New Testament, it was used as kind of a end time signal. When Jesus talked about the end times, when Paul talked about it, they talked about a trumpet sounding. The trumpet was used in Judaism and in ancient Israel. And again, we did this last week. I'm just catching us up for a number of purposes. As a means of warning, to signal an attack, to give an alarm within the city for an imminent attack, to signal a retreat as a cry to God for help, to indicate a victory has been won, to signal the announcement of good news, as an accompaniment to a religious ritual. We talked about, they gave money and the trumpet would sound in the temple and the synagogue. Very funny. I got to get one of those, I'll tell you. I think I'll get a trombone,
You got to hope that somebody's going to, give enough that you're going to.
Well, I'd start with $1 and go up from there. And as part of a theophany scene, the theophany scene, of course, being, God ascending to the earth in various end of the world context. So the sound of the trumpet is always associated post first century with the end of the world. With Christianity. So we look at those different. It can strike joy. It can strike terror. It can bring about reverent expectation. It all depends on the context in Revelation and in Jewish apocalyptic. And obviously we went through the passages, and I think where we left off was L. If you look at your letters on the sheets, it was number L is where we left off. Ezekiel 1:7. Okay, their legs were. Oh, yeah, no, that's the angel. Where did we get off on that? Okay, got off on that a little bit. So, but it was Isaiah 27:13. If I can find Isaiah 27:13, is it here? Let's see. Okay, where are you? There it is, back page. There it is, 6 on page 6L. Sorry about that. 6L. Isaiah 58, false and true worship, shout out, do not hold back, lift up your voice like a trumpet, announce my people their rebellion to the house of Jacob and their sins. And so it was used in the context of, in 27:13, right below there, and on that day a great trumpet will be blown, and those who were lost in the land of Assyria and those who were driven out of the land of Egypt will come and worship the Lord on the holy mountain in Jerusalem. Excuse me, let me get back to mine. There we go, slide real quick. Okay, so any questions about that?
What did a trumpet look like?
What's that?
What did a trumpet look like?
Actually, let's see, let me run back. I've got it here, what they look like. Let me run back to that slide. There it is, right there.
Okay.
There it is. That's basically what they look like. That's a really nice one. It's kind of a brass. And in Moses, the silver trumpets, back in Numbers, way back, they talked about the silver trumpets. So the trumpets were, they were metal. They were metallurgy or metal, and I don't know if they were that refined, but they were long. And the shofar, the shofar was I think a shofar was shorter. It was more like a ram's horn. Shofar was kind of like a ram's horn. But they had these kind of long trumpets as well, for the, especially in the first century, and certainly in the time of John. They would have had more refined instruments. So that's kind of what they look like.
Somebody had to be really skilled
Yes, yeah.
to make that.
Oh yes, oh yeah. They had incredible, I mean, when we go, I've been looking at some of the stuff, like I was looking last night online for I couldn't find it, but for an illustration of a censer, which is, where you put the incense, right? And that's what gets swung, right? But according to my notes, that in John's time, they used a censer that had a bowl in the shape of a hand. And so I kept looking for it and looking for it and looking for it. I could never find it. But what I did find from that era, from that time, first century, they had some amazing craft work in the censers. They were gorgeous, as much what it would look like today. So yeah, they had artisans who did some incredible work. And especially, as you will see when we come to, in fact, take a look at this. I mean, this is what originally the altar of the incense looked like. That's what it would look like. There's the brazier. It had the 4 horns on the corner. And there's the pans that would be used. This is pretty much what it would look like. This is a reproduction of it. But they had some what we would call high-end sanctuary accoutrements. We think about what we put into our sanctuaries. And always, I've been doing this, all these years, 38 years, and sometimes, it's one thing to add things to your building, classrooms, but when you're putting something in the sanctuary, A, you got to make sure all the elders approve of it, or your leadership. B, it's got to look correct to go in there. If it don't look right, you're going to hear about it. For example, and it's fine, but one thing I learned here very quickly is that the congregation and the leadership do not want to have a screen in there, which is fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever. And you know who were the ones that told me that the most? The younger couples in the church, the younger families.
I'll be.
Yeah, I'll be too. Well, they're here for a reason, right? Right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and they said, no, we don't want a screen, because they had been to other churches that were more studio-like. St. Andrews, very studio. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying very studio-like looking sanctuary space. Okay, that's not a critique. It's just, in fact, most contemporary worship spaces are studio spaces. Studio spaces, and then there's the traditional sanctuary. So the accoutrements of the temple were that was the temple was the central place in the world for all Jews to worship. So it had some amazing things in it. So we're going to talk about the throne room scene, and that's where we're picking up. Let's read. I'm going to just read this altar of incense. You don't have to read it. I don't have it in the sheet. So you shall make an altar on which to offer incense. You shall make it of acacia wood. It shall be 1 cubit long and 1 cubit wide. It shall be square and shall be 2 cubits high. Its horn shall be of one piece with it. You shall overlay it with pure gold, its top and its sides all around, and its horns, and you shall make for it a molding of gold all around, and you shall make 2 golden rings for it. Under its molding on 2 opposite sides of it you shall make them, and they shall hold the poles with which to carry it. You didn't touch the altar ever. You shall make the poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. The poles. You shall place it in front of the curtain that is above the Ark of the Covenant, in front of the mercy seat that is over the covenant, where I will meet with you. Aaron shall offer fragrant incense on it every morning. When he dresses the lamps, he shall offer it. And when Aaron sets up the lamps in the evening, he shall offer it. A regular incense offering before the Lord throughout your generations. You shall not offer unholy incense on it, or a burnt offering, or a grain offering. And you shall not pour a drink offering on it. Once a year, Aaron shall perform the rite of atonement on its horns. Throughout your generations, he shall perform the atonement for it once a year, Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, with the blood of the atoning sin offering. It is most holy to the Lord. So this goes all the way back to Exodus. And they still, we go into the synagogues, some synagogues, the more Orthodox, still have the altar of incense. It's amazing how specific Exodus was in these, and Leviticus, in setting out what these things were to look like and how they were to be designed and how they were to be produced. Pretty amazing.
Would it be portable then?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That was when, remember, Exodus, they had the tent of meeting. They had yet to have the temple. They had the tent of meeting. So it was to go with the people wherever they went. And the big division between northern Israel and southern Israel, the big division that emerged in Judaism was between those who said, we're a diaspora people, we live in the world, we go and God goes with us, and those who said, no, we are Jerusalem, we are the temple here, and we are a nation, and this is where we are. And that argument still goes on. So these things they don't stop, do they? Okay, yeah, this is 5:16. So I'm going to read the verse. Verse 3. Another angel came and stood at the altar of incense with a golden censer. And he was given a large quantity of incense to offer as a compliment to the prayers of all God's people upon the gold. This is 8:3. Upon the golden incense altar before the throne. And as I think I mentioned last week, we just started getting into this. The altar here is a counterpart to the incense altar in Jerusalem and the Jewish religion. All that we see here, as we see this is a throne room scene or a temple in heaven scene, and it's going to have complementary everything to the temple of Jerusalem. It is the perfected temple. It is the perfected temple, the way the temple ought to be. Another altar mentioned in Revelation is the altar of sacrifice. So there's 2 altars. Only 2 passages in Revelation, only 2, this one included, refer to the altar of incense. Now you see the altar of sacrifice, but only 2 passages refer to the altar of incense. And of course, in John's vision, they are used symbolically, as we're going to see. They're used here symbolically. And as I mean, the 7 angels do not officiate at the heavenly incense offering. It is assigned to a different angel. Another angel came and stood at the altar of incense. That's along with the 7, okay? Now some say, we'll get on to who that was when we get there, okay? Thank you, good. I just paid Verizon, great. Good for that. I'm sorry. Oh, what does it do this to me? Stop it. Door is wrong. All right. So, many ancient censers. This is what I was looking for. And I couldn't find it. I mean, I really looked hard. Many ancient censers were ladles shaped like a hand holding a shallow bowl. So the image here is kind of that idea, as we see what the angel does with the incense. is this ladle. It's not the pans, but it's a ladle that's like a bowl with a hand, in the shape of a hand. But I could not find that, and I'm still looking for that one. So the incense functions as a supplement to make the prayers more acceptable and pleasing to God. And so what we have in this scene, what we see are these prayers going up, and there's millions of them, countless, because it's all believers, all Christians. This isn't the prayers of the 144,000 or the prayers of the martyrs. This is everyone's prayers go up to God. Okay? Remember now, we're about to get the judgment. The judgment is unfolding, right? So the prayers are going up, that the judgment will unfold, and God will do justice upon the earth. And if you think about how often people in this world, how often Christians pray for justice, think about that. That's a massive scene. It's a massive idea. So if you imagine the prayers of justice being like the smoke going up, that's a lot of smoke. That's a lot of smoke. So this is a good example of that imagery being used. These prayers are the prayers of Christians living on the earth. These prayers for justice are to God from the living, like the prayers for justice for the martyrs in chapter 6. And as we just read, incense prayers were customary during the daily evening offerings. And if you look at M on your scripture sheets, Ezra 9, 5 through 15. At the evening sacrifice, I got up from my fasting with my garments and my mantle torn, and fell on my knees, spread out my hands to the Lord my God, and said, "Oh my God, I am too ashamed and embarrassed to lift my face to you, my God, for our iniquities have risen higher than our heads, and our guilt has mounted up to the heavens. From the days of our ancestors to this day, we have been deep in guilt, and for our iniquities, we, our kings and our priests, have been handed over to the kings of the lands, to the sword, to captivity, to plundering, and to utter shame, as is now the case. But now for a brief moment, favor has been shown by the Lord our God, who has left us a remnant and given us a stake in his holy place, in order that he may brighten our eyes and grant us a little sustenance in our slavery. For we are slaves. Yet our God has not forsaken us in our slavery, but has extended to us his steadfast love before the kings of Persia, to give us new life, to set up the house of our God, to repair its ruins, and to give us a wall in Judea and Jerusalem." Clearly, this was Ezra's post-exilic prayer. They had just come back from exile, and they're getting ready to build the new temple, or rebuild the temple. And this is the prayer. And so they're doing the evening sacrifice. But the evening sacrifice here, the incense going up, would include atonement. There'd be an element of atonement, because what you're hearing in this prayer is clearly atonement, not only for Ezra, but for the people, for Israel. So it's a prayer of atonement that we read in Ezra. And they did this daily, every morning and every evening. Okay? There were three ways in ancient Israel that incense was offered. First, incense or spice could be burned with a grain offering. With a grain offering. Not as a grain offering, as the Exodus passage points out, but with a grain offering. Okay? So it can be done that way. Number two, incense could be put in the censer and not put on the altar. So it was the fire for this incense was taken from the live coals from the brazen altar. So instead of laying it on the altar, it would have been kept in the censer and held or swung, just like we see in Roman Catholicism. Have any of you ever been to high service in the Roman Catholic Church? You do Christmas, and if you live near a cathedral where the seat of the bishop is, which I did when I was in Charlotte, Belmont Abbey, which was in a little town about 30 miles from Charlotte. And the bishop would come and at Christmas and do the high service. And I would go, and my sister would go with me, because we just wanted to see it. And they would do the censer, and they would throw water on you, and holy water on you, and but they wouldn't let us take communion. I think I did anyway. I'm Reformed. So Reformation Sunday, this Sunday, right? So it was really amazing. It was an amazing thing to see. Very powerful. The smell of incense. Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was at, I'm not sure if it was Greek or Russian, but an Orthodox
Yes.
funeral service.
Yes.
Where they used the, and it was very powerful.
It's very, Orthodox services, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, are very tactile.
Yeah.
They flood the senses. You smell things, you feel things. The funniest thing is the Greek Orthodox baptism, the traditional one. Have you heard of this one? All right. It's amazing. Once they bring the baby, the naked baby to the font, the whole congregation lines up around the church. They take the baby, dip the whole baby into the font, lift it up, and start passing it. The crying, screaming, wet baby, from person to person, all the way around to the end. Now that's the old traditional Greek Orthodox. They didn't do that here in the Greek Orthodox Church. But that's over there. They would have done that. Yeah. If they still do. Can you imagine what that would be like?
No.
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but that's what it is. And they pass it around and everybody gets wet and the baby screams on them. Probably pees on them too. But it's very tactile. It's very tactile. So in Reformed Church, we kind of desensitized, didn't we? Our services. I mean, Calvin was really big into that. You see, he wouldn't even allow stained glass because he thought these things were idolatry. Of course, now we're more flexible in allowing what's the word I'm thinking of? A more senses. I'm not going to say sensual because that's not the right word, but a service that allows to involve all of our senses. Which is kind of fun. Especially communion. Communion should be that. Communion should be where you touch things. Any thoughts about that? Anything? Okay. So the fire from the incense was taken from the live coals from the brazen altar. Incense was offered on the incense altar, as we said, twice a day in the AM and in the PM. And if you look at N on your sheet, Luke 1, 8 through 10, this is such a great story. This is the story of Zechariah, right? John's father, okay? Once when he was serving as priest before God and his section was on duty, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and offer incense. Now at the time of the incense offering, the whole assembly of the people was praying outside. This story of John's father, Zechariah, this story takes place on the Day of Atonement. And if you read the whole story, it's where the angel comes to Zechariah and announces that and strikes him dumb, as you would say, or strikes him unable to speak. And what it is, that whole story, you read that story, and it's a creepy, it's intended to be a creepy kind of story. He goes in by himself in the darkness, which is, in your whole lifetime, a priest would get one opportunity to do this. In your whole lifetime. And some didn't ever get it. You were chosen by lot. So he was a priest in a small town, at a small synagogue, and he was chosen to come to the temple. And he goes in there in the darkness, in the silence, making the incense offering. And that's when the angel Gabriel comes and says, you shall have a son. And then, of course, Zechariah says, well, I thought he asked him a question. And then you don't ask angels questions. Two things. Angels don't have knees. And second, you don't ask them questions. So, and you don't ask them questions with the attitude that Zechariah had. Zechariah had a kind of a doubting attitude. Mary didn't. She just asked, how can this be? She didn't say, this can't be. She said, how can this be? Zechariah was going, I don't believe it. And oh, well, you're going to learn. Boom, there you go. So, so it's an amazing story, but it takes place in that Holy of Holies, in that dark, nobody's in there, totally dark. And the altar, it's just a really great scene. Empty churches at night can be sometimes a little intimidating. They can be. Cathedrals can be really intimidating. So incense is offered on the Day of Atonement in the Holy of Holies. That was what this story was about. And then every day in the morning and in the evening. Incense also played an important role in the Greek religion. Incense was a part of the rituals in the temples, the temple religion, temple prostitution, and all that stuff going on. Incense was a part of that. And have you seen the movie 300?
Yes.
When they go to the oracle on the mountain,
Right.
and there's incense being used there. Yeah. I mean, 300 is, I wouldn't say it's historically accurate, but they do use a few things, from history. So verse 4, the smoke of the incense went up with the prayers of God's people from the hand of the angel before God. So up it goes. Coals from the brazier are heaped into the fire pan. There's the fire pan. And the incense is sprinkled on top of the coals. The analogy between smoke and prayer is emphasized in Philo, who, the Christian writer, Jewish Christian writer, who wrote from 20 to 50 AD, who says that the Word, the Logos, which is the archangel of the Father, pleads with the immortal as supplicant for afflicted mortality. So already they were thinking of the incense as that which plead, but they symbolize it, or they use it as a metaphor for the Word of God. The Word of God goes up, and the Word itself is an angel, a messenger going to God. So already they were beginning to redefine these traditional views in Judaism toward the way they were redefining it in a Christian manner. The hand of the angel, by the way, in verse 4, God's people from the hand of the angel before God, was probably referring to Michael, according to first century Jewish angelology. Did I put Michael in? I thought I did somewhere. Did I put him in here? Well, first, here's 4 uses of incense. I already put that on there. And then here's the hand of the angel. Here's an example now. Michael here, who in some Jewish circles was the tradition. He's not holding the censer. What's he holding in his hand?
Balance.
A balance. But Michael was always holding something. Michael the archangel was always had something in his hand, a sword, a balance, and in traditional, some viewed this scene of the incense as Michael being the angel that did the offering, and then threw it to the earth. We'll talk about that in a minute. So Michael was one who performed judgment. He was a judge. That's why he's holding the balances. And it looks like he's judging the beast. There's the sea beast, and he's about to stab him. It's kind of a blaze. And he's got knees.
Yeah, he does have.
Obviously not. Well, this is contemporary art. They don't read. They don't study like we do. I kept looking for any illustration of an angel without knees. I looked for this. Show you what a waste of my life is. I looked for like an hour for an illustration. Every one of them had knees. So, but my daughter's an artist. They don't know anything. Go ahead.
Going back to the altar of incense. So the altar of incense would be in the Holy of Holies.
Yeah, it would be in front of the Holy of Holies.
But outside of it?
No, it would be within it.
Within it.
Within
So that
it.
means that the normal, ordinary people would never see it.
That's correct. Okay, that's correct. Yeah.
So that's why the censers, I guess, would be, then so it would fill the censers, and then the censers would go out
Yes.
into the congregation.
Exactly. They'd walk out. Yes. Yeah. And further, and that would represent their prayers going up. Also, the smoke. They'd see the smoke going up. It was like a chimney, and they'd see the smoke going up out of the Holy of Holies. Okay. So verse 5. The angel received the censer and filled it with some glowing embers from the altar of incense, and now comes the shocking moment. threw them upon the earth. And there was thunder and rumbling and lightning and an earthquake. So we have this shocking scene, this beautiful scene, kind of almost serene, of the angel doing the traditional incense offering as if it were in the Holy of Holies before God. But this is an angel of judgment. So instead of, what does the angel do with the prayers? The prayers are turned into judgment. Actual, active judgment. If you look at Ezekiel 10:2, this is where this scene comes from in John. This is one of the sources. He said to the man clothed in linen, "Go within the wheelwork underneath the cherubim, fill your hands with burning coals from among the cherubim, and scatter them over the city." He went in as I looked on. Only an angel could fill its hand with hot coals. Right?
Yeah.
Or, when it says fill the hand, it could be the ladle that's shaped like a hand bowl, too. It could be that as well. It could be that as well. So what John applies this image to the punishment of pagans upon the earth. This is clearly a metaphor anticipating what is about to happen with the blowing of the trumpets, right? The fire that falls from heaven is usually a symbol of judgment. And we think about, I'm going to run to this one. This is kind of the, there's this angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, threw it on there, and there were peals of thunder. It's a pixelated, I'm sorry because some of these illustrations are not good. But that's kind of the way it was illustrated. So an artist illustrated that as throwing it upon the earth. It's not a great picture, and I apologize. But here is Sodom and Gomorrah, which is kind of the belief that this is kind of a redoing of Sodom and Gomorrah, except it's for the whole earth. The whole earth under judgment has become Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And that's a good illustration of it, I thought, of the fire raining down. And there goes Lot and his family. And there was Lot's wife, because she's a pillar of salt now when they came back, you know. So certainly, most scholars believe this was sourced in that this was a reference back to that idea of God's judgment. But instead of being for the wicked city, the whole earth was wicked. And that's where the fire falls. And then there's the signs of the theophany. And we know about signs of the theophany. They anticipate the divine judgments that follow the sounding of these 7 trumpets. And if you look at your final verse in this sheet, P, on the morning of the third, this is Exodus 19, we're familiar. On the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning, as well as a thick cloud on the mountain, and a blast of a trumpet so loud that all the people who were in the camp trembled. Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God. They took their stand at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke, because the Lord had descended upon it in fire. The smoke went up like the smoke of a kiln, while the whole mountain shook violently. So there was the signs of the theophany were thunder, lightning, a cloud, a loud trumpet, and earthquakes. And in here, earthquakes in Revelation, earthquakes an earthquake is very significant, and earthquakes have several different kinds of religious significance. They anticipate divine judgment. They are an instrument of divine judgment. If we go to our next sheet, Isaiah 24, the next supplement, we'll see an example of that. Everybody with me? Whoever flees at the sound of the terror shall fall into the pit, and whoever climbs out of the pit shall be in the snare. For the windows of heaven are open, and the foundations of the earth tremble. The earth is utterly broken. The earth is torn asunder. The earth is violently shaken. The earth staggers like a drunkard. It sways like a hut. Its transgression lies heavy upon it, and it falls and will not rise again. Which emphasizes that John's vision refers back to traditional Jewish apocalyptic, as Isaiah does here. This is what Isaiah's writing here, is traditional Jewish apocalyptic, of what the end of time will look like. And earthquakes, of course, are a part of that, okay? Earthquakes are a part of that. The earthquake also, as a theophany, by the way, it was a contemporary for John, a contemporary image It was part of the Greek tradition, and of course, they suffered tremendous earthquakes there, constantly. And we talked about one of the 7 cities. Which one was it?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. Very good, Philadelphia. Which and literally, you couldn't even go into the city. They stopped building the walls. And so there were, all over Asia Minor, there were terrible earthquakes. So then we come to, any questions about that? All right, now we come to verse 6.
I
Yep.
have one question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, I'll get you both, go ahead.
Going back a little bit, when it threw the coals on the earth, it doesn't say whole earth. It could just be it threw it on the ground.
Well, it says it through 1/3.
No.
We're not at 1/3 yet. We haven't gotten to 1/3 yet.
Okay.
It's a whether, I don't think it really matters whether it's a partial or a whole. It's judgment upon, there's a good question you brought up, it's important. Because biblical scholars go, wait a minute, where does the 1/3 come in as compared to this scene? Good question, that's a good question. This is not associated with the sound of the trumpet. This is associated with what? Anyone remember? What did the smoke represent?
Your prayers.
The prayers of people for justice. The prayers to God for justice. So this is the image of justice coming upon the earth. So it's not a thing to do with the 1/3. Nothing to do with that. It's more to do as a metaphorical image of God delivering justice. So you have to associate this one with the prayers of believers on the earth, crying for justice to God, and God delivering justice to the whole world, or to the universe, if you want to say that. But not to a portion. Not to a portion. The portion is the literal judgment. This is more the metaphorical, response to the prayers. It's a major, so God not only responds to the prayers, he responds to all the prayers, and God responds dramatically to all the prayers. An angel, the messenger, is the one that throws the coals down. Does that make sense? That's kind of the best explanation that the scholars can give as we look at that. You look kind of,
No.
oh, okay.
Okay, so it doesn't mean to destroy the earth.
No.
Judgment to the earth.
Judgment, yes. It's a judgment image. Because in the judgment itself, the whole earth isn't destroyed. Because remember, the whole purpose of saying 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is to bring about repentance. See? That's the whole point of it. So, so let's move on. Yeah, that's good. Good, thank you. Did I get everybody's question answered? Verse 6. Now we have kind of what is called a repetitive resumption. This is the exact repeat of verse 2 in chapter 8. The 7 angels with the 7 trumpets got ready to sound them. Now we're moving away from the symbolic cry for justice, and that's the tricky thing about Revelation. It jumps scenes a lot, and you have to kind of catch up with it or try to find your way through it. And so now we come to the first trumpet. I kept thinking about that margarine that used to advertise, imperial margarine. And the trumpet would sound, and then somebody'd have a crown on their head. That's kind of an apocalyptic image. I never thought margarine would be an apocalyptic. I was even going to show you a little video of that. A scene of that. I thought, that's really insane. Don't do that. Okay, the first angel sounded his trumpet, and there was hail and fire mixed with, here's the first trumpet. And see the long trumpet, everybody? See the long trumpet? Yeah. There was hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was thrown down to the earth, with the result that a third part of the earth was burned up. And this is interesting. All the green grass was burned up. Well, that's messed up. Because we only get a third. So later on it says a third of the grass. So how do we, that's what I'm saying. Also, you got to realize you're going from Greek to English, or Aramaic to English in our translation. And even in the Greek, it's hard to get the exact what they meant. So it can be a little bit tricky. So the mysterious sounding of the trumpet was sometimes considered a sign warning people of divine anger. Here's a breakdown of the trumpets. The seals are here too, but we're not at the seals yet. First 4 are supernatural. The final 3 are demonic. The first 4 are supernatural or metaphysical. The final 3 are demonic. And there's a big break between the first 4 and the last 3. And remember, it's the eagle we're going to see that cries out. And the last 3 are about to happen. Cries out, woe, woe, woe. 3 woes to represent the 3 things that are about to happen with the 3 trumpets. Because you think what you just saw was bad. Wait till you see what's coming. Okay. So that's kind of the breakdown of the trumpets. The sounding of trumpets is also found in some of the later Old Testament prophets as a signal of the day of the Lord. If you look at R on your supplement, there's 2 passages there. Zechariah 9, the Lord will appear over them, and his arrow go forth like lightning. The Lord God will sound the trumpet and march forth. This is R, in the whirlwinds of the south. And right below it, Zephaniah, the great day of the Lord is near and hastening fast. The sound of the day of the Lord is bitter. The warrior cries aloud there. The day will be a day of wrath, a day of distress and anguish, a day of ruin and devastation, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of trumpet blast and battle cry against the fortified cities and against the lofty battlements. So just as a reference there, we see this image again in the prophets, in the Old Testament prophets, as these are the events that are going to happen in Jewish apocalyptic thought when the world comes to an end. Okay, wait a minute. Let me close that. Okay, so the image was adapted from the early Christian church as a way of announcing the return of Christ. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. And that's in your again in your sheets. If you go to the next QRS, go to S in your sheets on the next page. The trumpet sound is also in the New Testament. We see it. Here's the first. Would someone read 1 Thessalonians 4:16? Because my voice is going to get tired. Would somebody read 1 Thessalonians 4:16?
For the Lord himself, with the cry of command, with the archangel's call, and with the sound of God's trumpet, will descend from heaven, and the dead in Christ will rise first.
Would someone read Matthew 24?
And he sent out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of heaven to the other.
And 1 Corinthians 15, somebody?
In a moment, in a twinkling of the eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed.
Yeah, so the trumpet is an important apocalyptic figure in the New Testament. John would have been well aware of that.
Messiah.
What's that?
That's from the Messiah. That's from the Messiah.
Oh, from the Messiah. Very good. Very good. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it's from the Messiah. Yes. Yeah. And again, here in Revelation, the trumpet's not associated with the return of Christ, but it is in the New Testament, in the Gospels and in the letters, but not in Revelation. It's associated with judgment, but Christ returns after judgment, or toward the end. That's the big reveal. But you'll see that when we get to it a million years from now. Here's another image. The phenomenon of blood raining from the sky occurs frequently in Roman religion as a divine warning. Here's that image I used. The first angel blew this trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were hurled to the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees was burned up, and all green grass was burned up. By the way, I didn't get the image, but there's quite a few images of blood rain, which is still a natural phenomenon today. It still happens around the world. They call it blood rain because it's the color. It's a red rain. And it's in heavily polluted cities. It happens in China and in Asia and in other parts, heavily polluted areas. They'll get this red rain. And if you go to Google and type in rain like blood, and then look at the images, you'll see all these images of it, pictures of it, okay? So it's kind of creepy. I don't want to see any red rain. That's not a good thing. And by the way, this phenomenon of blood occurs frequently in Roman religion as a divine warning. And then we come to the theme of the third of various parts of creation. Now this is again directly from Ezekiel. This is an Ezekiel rewriting, okay? Look at T on your supplemental sheet. T. Anybody want to read T? Ezekiel 5:2.
1/3 of the hair you shall burn in the fire inside the city. When the days of the siege are completed, 1/3 you shall take and strike with the sword all around the city, and 1/3 you shall scatter to the wind, and I will unsheath the sword after them.
This is the judgment of Jerusalem, and as you can see, 3 different fates befall 1/3 of each part of the population of Jerusalem. The first one is you shall burn, 1/3 will burn, 1/3 will be stricken with the sword, and 1/3 will be scattered. Okay, so this is Ezekiel writing from and so this image that John uses is directly from there. But of course, we remember that in Ezekiel, the Jewish apocalyptic, there's no interest at all in repentance. It's just judgment. This is going to happen. You can't stop it. Whereas in John, the 1/3 really becomes an image of repentance. Why the proportionality in Ezekiel? Well, why the proportionality in Old Testament apocalyptic? Well, probably to actually reflect what happens in their real world. Not everybody gets killed. There's always a remnant. And maybe to emphasize the idea of a remnant. But here, 3 judgments, 1/3 each. Everything's gone, right? 3 judgments, 1/3 each. Without any thought of repentance whatsoever. Whereas very different the way the vision uses that idea here in Revelation. Okay? So, then we go to verse 8. Verse 8. The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire. So I'm going to flipping out here. Cast into the sea. It was cast into the sea, with the result that a 1/3 part of the sea became blood. Possibly extraordinary volcanic activity. What had just happened when John is writing? Vesuvius erupts. Vesuvius had erupted in 79. So this was a theme that was on everybody's mind. I mean, it looked like, at that time, the end of the world. In fact, that's the second part I want us to share together. Debris from Vesuvius fell into the bay, making it impossible to land the boats. I want us to read this, and it's long, but let's just share it together. Maybe we'll just read parts of it. It's Pliny to Cornelius Tacitus as have any of you read this? As an eyewitness to Vesuvius. Let's pass this around real quick. It's kind of long, but it's really good. What did Vesuvius look like? Pass that around. Here. All right. And you'll see elements in his writing of Revelation, of the judgment of Revelation. Let's take a look. Let's everybody got their... All right, let's read along. Thank you for asking me to send you a description of my uncle's death so that you can leave an accurate account of it for posterity. I know that immortal fame awaits him of his death is recorded by you. It is true that he perished in a catastrophe which destroyed the loveliest regions of the earth, a fate shared by whole cities and their people, and one so memorable that it is likely to make his name live forever. And he himself wrote a number of books of lasting value, but you write for all time and can still do much to perpetuate his memory. The fortunate man, in my opinion, is he to whom the gods have granted the power either to do something which is worth recording or to write what is worth reading. And most fortunate of all is the man who can do both. Such a man was my uncle, as his own books and yours will prove. So you set me a task I would choose for myself, and I am more than more willing to start on it. My uncle was stationed at Mycenium, in active command of the fleet. On the 24th of August in the early afternoon, my mother drew his attention to a cloud of unusual size and appearance. He had been out in the sun, had taken a cold bath and lunched while lying down, and was then working at his books. He called for his shoes and climbed up to a place which would give him the best view of the phenomenon. It was not clear at the distance from which mountain the cloud was rising. It was afterwards known to be Vesuvius. Its general appearance can best be expressed as being like an umbrella pine, for it rose to a great height on the sort of trunk and then split off into branches. I imagine because it was thrust upwards by the first blast and then left unsupported as the pressure subsided, or else it was borne down by its own weight so that it spread out and gradually dispersed. Sometimes it looked white, sometimes blotched and dirty, according to the amount of soil and ashes it carried with it. My uncle's scholarly acumen saw at once that it was important enough for a closer inspection. No, it's not. And he ordered a boat to be made ready, telling me I could come with him if I wished. I replied that I preferred to go on with my studies. Good and smart thinking. And as it happened, he had himself given me some writing to do. As he was leaving the house, he was handed a message from Rectina, wife of Tashus, whose house was at the foot of the mountain, so that escape was impossible except by boat. She was terrified by the danger threatening her and implored him to rescue her from her fate. He changed his plans, and what he had begun in a spirit of inquiry, he completed as a hero. He gave orders for the warships to be launched and went on board himself with the intention of bringing help to many more people besides Rectina, for this lovely stretch of coast was thickly populated. He hurried to the place which everyone else was hastily leaving, steering his course straight for the danger zone. He was entirely fearless, describing each new movement and phase of the portent to be noted down exactly as he observed them. Ashes were already falling, hotter and thicker, as the ships drew near, followed by bits of pumice and blackened stones charred and cracked by the flames. Then suddenly they were in shallow water, and the shore was blocked by the debris from the mountain. See, that's that image we just saw in Revelation. For a moment, my uncle wondered whether to turn back. When the helmsman advised this, he refused, telling them that fortune stood by the courageous, and they must make for Pomponianus, I can't say that, at Stabiae. I didn't study Latin, I studied Greek. He was cut off there by the breadth of the bay, for the shore gradually curves around a basin filled by the sea, so that he was not yet in danger, although it was clear that this would come nearer as it spread. Pomponianus had therefore already put his belongings on board ship, intending to escape if the contrary wind fell. This wind was, of course, full in my uncle's favor, and he was able to bring his ship in. He embraced his terrified friend, cheered and encouraged him, and thinking he could calm his friends by showing his own composure, gave order that he was to be carried to the bathroom. After his bath, he lay down and died. He was quite cheerful. At any rate, he pretended he was, which was no less courageous. Meanwhile, on Mount Vesuvius, broad sheets of fire and leaping flames blazed at several points, their bright glare emphasized by the darkness of night. My uncle tried to allay the fears of his companions by repeatedly declaring that these were nothing but bonfires left by the peasants in their terror. I know. Or else empty houses on fire in the districts they had abandoned. Then he went to rest and certainly slept, for as he was a stout man, his breathing was rather loud and heavy and could be heard by people coming and going outside his door. It is great. It is great. By this time, the courtyard giving access to his room was full of ashes mixed with pumice stones, so that its level had risen, and if he had stayed in the room any longer, he would have never got out. He was wakened, came out, and joined Pomponianus. That's it, Pomponianus, got it. And the rest of the household who had sat up all night. They debated whether to stay indoors or take their chance in the open, for the buildings were now shaking with violent shocks and seemed to be swaying to and fro as they were torn from their foundations. Outside, on the other hand, there was a danger of falling pumice stones, even though these were light and porous. However, after comparing the risk, they chose the latter. In my uncle's case, one reason outweighed the other, but for the others, it was a choice of fears. As a protection against falling objects, they put pillows on their heads, tied down with cloths. Elsewhere, there was daylight by this time, but there was still in darkness. See, again, these images in Revelation. Blacker and denser than any ordinary night, which they relieved by lighting torches and various kinds of lamps. The torch is going to be an important image in a few minutes, later as we go through Revelation. My uncle decided to go down to the shore and investigate on the spot the possibility of any escape by sea, but he found the waves still wild and dangerous. A sheet was spread on the ground for him to lie down, and he repeatedly asked for cold water to drink. Then the flames and smell of sulfur, which gave warning of the approaching fire, drove the others to take flight and roused him to stand up. He stood leaning on two slaves, unbelievable, then suddenly collapsed, I imagine because the dense fumes choked his breathing by blocking his windpipe, which was constitutionally weak and narrow and often inflamed. When daylight returned on the 26th, 2 days after the last day he had seen, his body was found intact and uninjured, still fully clothed, and looking more like sleep than death. Meanwhile, my mother and I were at Misenum, but this is not of any historic interest, and he only wanted to hear about my uncle's death. I will say no more, except to add that I've described in detail every incident which I either witnessed myself or heard about immediately after the event, when reports were most likely to be accurate. It is for you to select what best suits your purpose, for there is a great difference between a letter to a friend and history written for all to read.
This had to be days before Vesuvius blew. Because when it blew, the pyroclastic debris and cloud moved so fast, it covered the city.
But I don't know how far Misenus is, or this area is, from Pompeii. So I'm not sure how close they are to Pompeii.
Pompeii was completely
It's gone. It's gone. It's gone. I don't know. I mean, it's a guess. It's a guess. He doesn't say that in here. And really it doesn't matter because the whole event was long. I mean, it was, even though the eruption itself, but the whole effect of it, anytime there's going to be an earthquake, anytime there's going to be an eruption, there's earthquakes that precede it. And in Vesuvius, there's still earthquakes at Vesuvius. In fact, some are saying that Vesuvius is going to blow again.
Well, you have Etna on Sicily.
Yeah.
And then you have
Etna, yes.
Vesuvius down near Naples. And I mean, it is on a fault that it's, if I was an Italian, I'd be living north.
Well, it's interesting. The one thing about Mount St. Helens is everybody knew it was coming. They knew it was coming. But people chose not to go. And they didn't know when it was going to blow, but they knew it was coming. And especially the geologists, they knew something was going to happen at some point. But when it went, wasn't that amazing when that happened? The whole side of the mountain blew out. And if you go see it, anybody seen Mount St. Helens post?
Post.
Both of you have? It must be pretty amazing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Did you fly over it or did you go to it?
Oh, that's where I went to dental school, was in Portland.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, yeah, we drove up there and saw the devastation. And
Were you there when it happened?
no.
Okay.
It happened the year before I...
Really? Really? Yeah. What did people describe what it was like? What did they share? What kind of things did they remember?
Well, just that you couldn't see it from Portland.
Oh, okay.
So, but you could see it, the devastation. You had to go around it to the north side in order to see the devastation, but the mud
Yes.
and the trees and the denuded forest
Yes, yeah.
was impressive.
I went, when I was in Africa, a Peace Corps guy, and at Goma, which is northern Congo, they had a huge volcano eruption, and the huge amounts of lava spilled down. I went, and of course, they don't pick up after the devastation because they don't have the manpower, the ability, or the technology. And everything looks like it did just right after it blew up. So the cars are there that had the people in it, and the homes, and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, the people are gone, of course, but I mean, that it's just what it looked like. And of course, the lava is black now. It's just black pumice, you know. And I'm talking about a whole mountainside of it. And you go over it. We flew over it. It was really amazing to see. I've never seen anything like that.
I was in Pompeii a couple of years ago.
Okay.
They said that they now think that most of the people did escape.
Really? Really?
Probably because it was more drawn out in time maybe than we think.
That's why I think this is
Yeah,
better. That
very good.
Much before when Vesuvius was showing the
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I also have been to Pompeii and Hercules.
That would make sense. That would make sense.
And when you see those bodies that are frozen in
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
the pyroclastic cloud,
Yes.
it shows you just how, I mean, they're burnt in time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
It's right there,
They
yeah.
were right there.
Amazing.
And
And according to what I have here, only 12,000 to 15,000 people lost their lives. And the population in that area was much larger than that. Oh, well over 1 million in the whole region. So you're right. I mean, a lot of people obviously did get away from it.
Well, the interesting thing too is that many of those deaths were from toxic gas.
well, that's what happened to him.
Well, that's what it sounds like to his uncle. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's, you said they smelled the sulfide,
Yeah.
sulfur, the
Yeah.
hydrogen sulfide, that's one of the most toxic gases.
Yeah. Yep. And when you smell it, see you later.
Yeah.
You're done. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's really interesting. And a third part of verse 9. Let's keep going. Verse 9. And a third part of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third part of the boats were destroyed. Well, now we see the image of boats in Pliny's letter to Cornelius, or to Tacitus. And Dio, the Greek writer, claims that it destroyed all fish and birds in the area. That's what Dio said, that there was a major fish kill as well. So this image of the third really lines up with the experience of Vesuvius.
Yes.
So the memory is there. The memory is fresh, you know. And then verse 10, the third angel sounded his trumpet, and a huge star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and fell on a third part of the rivers and on the springs of water. This is a doublet of 8:8. In the ancient world, comets were considered, there's your comet. Sorry about that, I gotta get, there we go. Comets were considered, there we go. Comets were considered signs of ancient doom. Mainly doom. It could be a sign of a birth or a sign, but usually it was a sign something bad was about to happen. Oops, that was really good, Matt. That's water anyway. And the burning star affected 1/3 part of the rivers and the springs, according to chapter 10. A third part of the rivers and the springs of water. Now let's keep going in verse 11. Now the name of the star is wormwood, and a third part of the water became bitter like wormwood, so that many people died as a result of the water because it turned bitter. So, there is no evidence at all in antiquity that there was a star called wormwood. Didn't exist in anything. So, obviously, here in Revelation, John, the vision's talking about the effect of this star falling to earth, the effect of it, and the effect on the world. And if you look at on your sheet at 4 Ezra 5:9, all salt waters shall be found in the sweet, and all friends shall fight one another, then wisdom shall hide itself, and understanding shall withdraw into its treasury. 4 Ezra was post-Christian, the It was in the Christian time. It was a Christian apocalyptic. Ezra was a Christian apocalyptic, interestingly enough. And so, or was it? I have to look at that and make sure. But anyway, regardless, I want to stop here. We'll stop in just a minute, but I wanted to say something about the parasite-killing, cancer-fighting power of wormwood. What is wormwood? Wormwood belongs to the daisy family. Did you know that? Belongs to the daisy family. Native to Central and Southern Europe, North Africa, Siberia and India, North America, Central America, and South America. Now here's my handout for today. The True passage. Tarragon is derived from wormwood. So it has a funny smell to it. And you certainly wouldn't want to drink tarragon. Pass it around. Amy was mad because I took her tarragon.
They put that in spaghetti, though.
Anybody use tarragon in cooking?
They sometimes put that in spaghetti.
Spaghetti,
Yeah.
Pass it on around to everybody.
It's not a bad smell.
Oh, it's not a bad smell. But you wouldn't want to drink it. You wouldn't want to drink water. And this is what's interesting about tarragon. It is such a strong spice or a strong herb that 1 ounce, and that, a single ounce diluted in 500 gallons of water can still be tasted. That's how strong it is. Thank you, sir. Just lay it on the table up here, and it'll be fine. Just 1 ounce. The spice tarragon and the sagebrush plant belong to the same genus, sagebrush plant. The bitterness of wormwood was proverbial throughout the ancient world. It was well known. And that's why I was giving the example of the single ounce diluted in 500 gallons of water can be tasted still. Medicinal use of the herb was to expel worms from the intestines. And guess what? It's still used that way today in Central and South America. Parasite killing. Parasite, I don't know about the cancer part, but parasite killing. Still used today in wormwood. The German word for wormwood is related to vermouth, which contains an extract of it. So every time you have that martini, you're drinking wormwood. So what basically we're learning is that in the judgment, a third of river and springs became a martini, basically. So wormwood is actually quite an interesting plant. It has a lot of uses to it. But the interesting thing is it's still being used as a parasital treatment in South America and Central America. Do you know we have a lady in our church, one of the first Peace Corps workers, the earlier ones, that has schistosomiasis and still has the parasite in her. In fact, it comes out on her arm occasionally. She'll always have it until she dies. She was one of the early Peace Corps workers, and she got it. By then, by the time I went, they had warned us and taught us how to keep that from happening. But when they first went, so if you wore if you wore sandals and you stepped in a mud puddle, you had a good shot of getting that parasite. And you live with it the rest of your life. It won't kill you. It will kill you if they don't treat it, but it won't kill you. But, so it's interesting on wormwood. And I'm going to stop with Jeremiah 9:15, where we see in Old Testament apocalyptic, the word wormwood is mentioned. Therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, I am feeding this people with wormwood and giving them poisonous water to drink. So wormwood is an image from the Old Testament, obviously, and an interesting one. Now this is where we're going to stop today. I wanted to be sure that we got through that. That the name of the star is wormwood, but again, it's only named because of the effect that it has. So what it does, what it's basically saying from John's perspective, or from the vision's perspective, is it's turning the third of the river and springs to poison. You can't drink it. It's poisonous. They're not thinking of the other uses of the plant. It's just the bitterness of it. That's like hops are bitter, aren't they? Yeah, hops, like hops. like hops. And so the effect of it is what they're talking about. Any questions so far? Well, we'll stop here, and I appreciate you. We'll finish up easily next week on 8, and then go into 9. We'll read 9 next week on 9, where we see the final 3 trumpets. The final 3 trumpets. That's when bad things really start happening. Because that's when the demonic powers are loosened upon the earth. But this was interesting, wasn't it? I thought it was great reading Pliny's letter, and then this.
Yeah.
Pliny's letter is really interesting.
Pliny was a great writer.
Yes, he was.
And, his letter to Trajan about Christians was just foundational. Yeah. All right. God bless you all, and have a great week, and we'll see you next Thursday, okay? And have a good weekend. Take care.
Bill, I'll call Al. He has got written directions. He was my navigator.
Yeah.
So he wrote all the directions.